evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled August ordinance meeting. My name is Eloise Melendez. I'm the chair of this committee. To my far left, Councilman Hempstead, Councilman Stern, Councilmember Siegelbaum, Councilmember Livingston. To my right, Councilmember Ioannidis, Corporation Counsel Mario Capola, Brian Candela, also Corporation Counsel. Our Corporation Counsel has a statement to read.
Yeah, well, basically, sure. I usually don't need a microphone. I'll try to speak loudly for you. So, as all of you are aware, first set of agenda items for tonight was a discussion, or actually scheduled as a public hearing regarding the innovation the ordinances pertaining to the innovation district and the reorganization ordinances. So, as some of you may know, there's a provision within our charter which provides for a requirement that there be legal notice for a public hearing for any proposed ordinances that are considered by the committee. And that's section 1-191.1 of the charter. And in this case, what happened was legal notice was provided over 7 days prior to the to this evening's hearing, or meeting I should say, and the notice provided a description of the ordinances that were being considered at the public hearing. Those ordinances were also made available to the public on the city's website. I was informed, I guess today, that one council member had questioned whether the notice that was published in the hour and the copy of the ordinances on the city's website provided the public with sufficient notice of tonight's public hearing as is required under section 1-191.1 of the charter. While I believe that the public notice provided for these public hearings complied with the requirement in the charter for providing public notice, I recommended today that the committee not proceed with a public hearing on either of the proposed ordinances this evening, but rather allow for the public to provide comment this evening for everybody who came out with regard to both of these ordinances, as is a general practice for this committee with regard to any proposed ordinance that's being discussed, so that everybody who came out this evening has an opportunity to provide their comments, and those comments would be taken into consideration at a future public hearing regarding both of these items. It's my understanding that the committee will take a vote this evening to hold a public hearing on both of the ordinances for the September 7th meeting prior to the council's regularly scheduled meeting that evening, and there will be public notice provided for that public hearing. So kind of was a decision to sort of split the baby here, allow tonight's meeting to go forward, allow everybody from the public to be able to speak, for the committee to take into consideration everybody's comments, but to hold an additional meeting which would technically be a public hearing, whereby everybody will have another opportunity to speak before the committee regarding both of these ordinances. And just so everybody understands, the charter provision was enacted, I think, back in like 1980, back when I was just a little baby and the internet didn't really exist. So the whole intent of the charter provision is to provide the public with notice of the date, time, and location for a meeting to discuss a proposed ordinance, but you also want to give the public an opportunity to see the actual ordinance. So back then, the idea was, let's just require that it be put into, that the text of the ordinance be put into the legal notice that goes in the paper. Today, and for many years actually now, the practice has been that you give notice about the meeting, you reference what the proposed ordinance is, and then you provide a copy of the ordinance on the city website. It's obviously more convenient for everybody to be able to access it there than a hard copy newspaper. So having said that, I understand the concern that the ordinance actually says to publish a copy of the ordinance within the legal notice. So again, out of an abundance of caution, taking a conservative approach, I said, let's just have another public hearing in a few weeks. I would also point out we did a little bit of research quickly before the meeting because I was curious in recent years how often has the city actually published legal notice to include a copy of the whole ordinance, and going back on 11, 12 years, in more than 2/3 of the cases, the ordinance was actually not published, not published as part of the legal notice. So it's been the practice for many, many years of the city to not actually publish the entire text of a proposed ordinance, or rather give reference to the fact that the ordinance is being considered in the legal notice, and then provide the actual copy of it on the city website. So at some point, if there's ever a new charter revision commission, they should probably take up this particular provision in the charter at that time to probably revise it to reflect a more practical way of providing legal notice, which, quite frankly, the city has undergone for a long time. So anyways, I was asked to comment on this, so that's why I'm here this evening. Chair. Chair number one.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I have a motion to reschedule the public hearing?
I move that we schedule the public hearing for the items listed in the public hearing here. I will read them for Tuesday, September 4th, 2018 at 7 p.m. at a room to be determined.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor?
May someone just make a comment prior to voting?
I'm sorry, what? Oh, yes.
Just briefly, Madam Chairman, it's been suggested through leadership and legal that this public hearing was not properly noticed. While my opinion on the content of the ordinance has not changed, I do want my opinion to be informed by comments made in the legitimate public hearing. I think process is very important with a proposal as consequential as this one, and I look forward to hearing from everyone who wants to speak tonight.
Okay. Mr. Hempstead? Just a mic.
No.
Yeah. We're in a different room this time.
Thank you for letting that voice be heard this evening. Thank you for the law department for changing it after I sent that information. I do appreciate it, because it even forced me my understanding that things were moving through, so you may want to take that up if we ever talk about charter revision. In section 7-8, violations and penalties. If anybody unlawfully or offense of doing the act is required, or failure to do any act is declared to be unlawful or no specific offense provided for. In other words, if we improperly acted tonight and did not do, if we violated a charter provision, there is a provision here that each person can be fined up to $500 and jailed up to 1 year. All right, so it's section 7-8. So I'm glad we're not in that position anymore, because that was the second part of it tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Gardner?
I just wanted to make clear that we're just voting on a public hearing and not the actual.
Yes, we are not voting on any of the proposed ordinances. We are voting for a public hearing to be held in 2 weeks, September 4th. That's the only vote that's happening.
Excuse me. This is September what? 4th. Yeah, the 11th. Okay.
Okay, all those in favor? Oh, Mr. Hempstead?
7 o'clock.
7, we said that, 7 o'clock. The room, no. The room's to be announced. It will be announced and posted properly. All those in favor? Okay, approved unanimously? Okay. So obviously because of this mistake and the fact that people came here thinking that it was a public hearing and to speak on proposed ordinances, we are going to act like this is a public comment section of our meeting and allow the public to speak. Because of this, if you're here to speak, whether it be on reorg or an innovation district, just like any public comment section of our committee, you have the opportunity to speak on it in no particular order. You first come, first serve. Whoever, I don't know if everyone got an opportunity to sign, but there's no order because there's no public hearing. So.
Nice to handle it.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Did you mention recognize people?
People who did, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Did you want to speak? Okay, so I will call it the end. Nancy Rosette. And just please speak at the podium. Everyone has 3 minutes when I lift this up.
You gotta give us three, then we're gonna be 2 public hearings, you gotta give us 3 minutes per issue. If we were gonna speak at each separate meeting, that's not fair.
3 minutes per issue.
Per ordinance. Per ordinance.
Is there a sign-up sheet?
Yes, but I have it now, so I'll call you at the end.
Write it down.
I'll write you.
I'm sorry for being out of order. I don't
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not a public hearing, but to the extent that the committee wants to extend people additional time since there's 2 ordinances, my understanding is that the 3-minute rule is relatively loose, quite
Yeah,
often.
I don't think there are, there aren't that many people, so I'll allow that. I just want people to understand, when I lift this, there are 30 seconds left. And to please indicate at the very beginning of your comments whether or not you'll be speaking on 1 issue or 2 issues. Okay? Does everyone understand? Great. Okay, sorry about that. Okay.
Yeah, the time to adjust the mic doesn't count against me, does it? My name is Nancy Rosette. I live at 399 Main Avenue. While I chair the Bike Walk Commission and chaired its predecessor organization, the Mayor's Bike Walk Task Force, I'm speaking as a private citizen tonight. Although Alicia King presented the ideas of the reorganization to the Commission at its June meeting, we did not formally vote to support the plan as it was still in the talking stage. That said, I think most members viewed the reorganization as a positive step for biking and walking in Norwalk. I support the creation of the Economic and Community Development Department. While the Commission has worked with the Department of Public Works to improve the built environment for all users of the roads, which is a large part of the Complete Streets philosophy, I feel that we will be able to enlarge that effort with the creation of this department. Having a single department housing those responsible for transportation and mobility, as well as business development and tourism, will make it much easier to continue to pursue complete streets improvements in Norwalk. I also look forward to working closely with the transportation planner, who will be part of this department. Per the proposed job description, the transportation planner plans and develops transportation and traffic calming projects with an emphasis on complete streets, acts as the project manager for various projects from conception to implementation, including community outreach and engagement, meets with various public groups, municipal and state officials to work toward long-term solutions for transportation-related projects, such as street enhancements for pedestrians, cyclists, transit passengers, and motorists, and also acts as liaison for the Bike Walk Commission. I also support the proposed reorganization of our government. The current organization of our city government has led to many siloed departments. When the Bike Walk Commission was created by this committee, the Public Works, Health, Police, and Planning and Zoning departments, as well as the Redevelopment Agency, were added as ex officio members. Their participation at our monthly meetings has made communication and cooperation amongst them and the Commission much easier. I anticipate the proposed reorganization, which groups functions and services by the nature of their work, will make such communication and cooperation much easier both for those in government and the general public. Thank you.
Thank you. Judd Alley?
Hi, I'm Judd Ailey, 21 Split Rock Road. I'm on the Parking Authority and the Bike Walk Commission, but I'm here as a private citizen tonight. And I fully support the reorganization. I think in particular, the position of Chief of Community and Economic Development is key. Under that is transportation, traffic, and parking. And I think transportation, traffic, and parking are key to our long-term economic development. And that's it.
Thank you. Rich Bonifant? And again, if you're speaking on 2 issues, please just let us know before.
Which one is it? Good evening, is that it? No. Rich Bonifant, 17 Park Hill Avenue. I don't really know what to say because I wasn't going to plan on talking on the content of these ordinances. I had 10 arguments about why the public hearing was illegal, but you addressed it. And you realized that it wasn't published in a newspaper and all that kind of thing. So, and my comments are in the minutes from last month about the Innovation District, which I think is one of the worst ideas that's coming around the pike in a long time. I could see downtown District A, everybody knocking down bakeries, flower shops, diners, anything in one floor. They're going to knock it all down. The landlord's going to build 5-story apartment buildings and get a tax break for 15 years with no place for the kids to play and no place to go to school, and we're running out of land, okay? So that was my part on the Innovation District, and good luck with that one. As far as the reorganization goes, I didn't really study the other offices too much, but I just can't help but wonder, does Alicia King come to work every day crafting her new job title, her new salary, her new powers that nobody talks to the mayor until they talk to me first? And at the very least, if you're going to turn the assistant mayor into a chief of staff, please keep the term concurrent with the mayor's term so some new mayor coming in doesn't get stuck with somebody they don't want. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Britt Thompson?
Lisa Britt, was it, which ones? Lisa Britton Thompson, 24 Highland Avenue. I'm going to comment both on the reorg as well as the Innovation District. First, I just wanted to also make a couple comments regarding Attorney Coppola in terms of what he said about it was not within the rules, or we were within the rules in terms of what was published. First off, I want to comment, this is August. Most people are on vacation. So in terms of transparency, I think this was very unfortunate to try and hold a public hearing the last week in August when everyone's on vacation before they go back to school. Secondly, in the spirit of transparency as well, talking about never publishing the ordinances in the paper, you're talking about a major reorganization that's usually done via charter revision, and you're talking about $15 million of taxpayer money. And so I think in the spirit of transparency, those ordinances should be published in the paper. That's all I have to say about that. First, I'll comment briefly. All of you, I respect you for your service to the community, but you're supposed to be a check and balance on the mayor's office, not a rubber stamp. No one disputes the need for City Hall to be more responsive, yet the mayor's office claims of studying the reorganization. There's been no real evidence presented. In all the public hearings that I've witnessed, the mayor nor his staff have failed to explain any additional details to the taxpayer. Goals and objectives of the reorg, projected outcomes for residents and businesses, any projected metrics, any savings, the impact on employees and their work rules, employees' contracts, impact on the charter, impacts on our boards and our commissions and our agencies, and moreover, how the success or failure of this would be evaluated. We repeatedly, it's mentioned that New Haven is a benchmark, probably because Ms. King heralds from there, yet they're raising their taxes 11%. They're fiscally unstable, similar to Hartford. They're going to be looking for a bailout. We just had a bunch of people OD in a park up there. They are not a model for Norwalk. Reorganizations look at efficiencies from the bottom up, and to date, this has been strictly a top-down reorganization, with the proviso that employees and department chiefs, the real experts, will figure this out as they go along. Again, I ask council members to think long and hard about your loyalty to party versus the community that you're supposed to be serving. A couple of comments on the Innovation District. Again, I'll start from the bottom. We're in a budget crisis. The governor has already nominated 3 zones in Norwalk for federal funds, so there is no need for a conflicting local tax program. It's subject to corruption or incompetence as council members pick winners and losers instead of the marketplace. Giving money to some developers while pursuing others smacks of cronyism. And finally, what we really should be focusing on doing is fixing the permitting process and becoming easier to do business with. That's what will make Norwalk thrive. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Deborah Goldstein.
Deborah Goldstein, 66 Osborne. I'm speaking as a private citizen today. I will be speaking on both ordinances, but also a word on the process here around the public hearing. I'm going to launch into my usual lecture about the idea that the website is the easiest way for people to get information. There is a significant percentage of my district that is so economically disadvantaged that they either do not have internet access, or they do not have unlimited internet access, or they do not have fast enough bandwidth to use it for these purposes on top of their kids studying for school and the rest of the things that they need the internet for. You need to be mindful of that. And also a word on this idea about the notification in the newspaper. The reason notification process is moved to the newspaper and public display ads was to spare the city the expense of mailing a notice to every person in the city. If we deviate from the newspaper, we need to make sure that we replace it with a process that's in the spirit of getting the information to everybody. So, with that said, moving on to the Innovation District. You all know that the citizenry objects to the continued rush to dense development, especially housing, without adhering to a plan. Our POCD is being cooked right now. We doubly object to adding insult to injury by asking us to contribute tax incentives to do it. We have not shown ourselves, we in Norwalk, have not shown ourselves particularly adept at selecting plans that align with market timing. So if you're going to pass this proposal, it's my strong recommendation that you build in some conditions that ensure that the developers put their money where their mouth is. Number one, developers should be able to apply only once every 5 years, whether successful or not. This will give successor councils a chance to monitor the performance of a particular project before letting the same outfit come back in for another round. And it will ensure that they put their best project first. Developers should agree that they will not seek amendments to zoning or to their approved project once incentives are granted. This will prevent the continual shell game of getting one project approved and building something different. And again, ensure that they will only propose their most viable project for vetting. And lastly, we should learn from POCO and the mall. A clawback provision to prevent incentives from riding along with an undeveloped hole in the ground if the developer decides to sell their property, or there's a change in control. Now I'd like to speak to the reorg. I'm not going to bother with the specifics of the reorg positions. Many others speaking here tonight, I think, are going to cover the obvious shortfalls and some of the blind spots. But I'm going to say this is like deja vu all over again. Once again, like charter revision before it, this reorg starts and ends with a faulty premise that paying more money to people will magically produce efficiency to our operations and also fix the city's dysfunctional planning and zoning process. Everybody remember this, Jim? This is the 2015 Economic Development Action Plan. When's the last time our Planning Commission or Common Council got an update or a report card on how this has been executed? Most of the positions getting raises and title bumps today, or 2 weeks from now, are the folks that were supposed to be accountable for the outcomes in this high school book report. And speaking of outcomes, we still have not modernized our budgeting process to create true linkages to the planning process or to create accountability for those outcomes. This proposal, this reorg proposal, is a solution in search of a problem to solve, and it's not ready for prime time. And I strongly urge you ask everyone involved in this to get back to running the city by permanently voting this down. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Kosar. Sorry.
Sorry, question. Can we clap? Or is that illegal?
You could, but limit it, please, to just so we can.
Margaret Koslar, 57 Tierney Street in Norwalk. I don't really have any prepared notes, but I'm mainly here to talk about the Innovation District. I guess my concerns, first of all, are why more apartments? The city is literally being flooded with apartments, so I'd like to know where are the hard studies that show that there's the need for this influx of residential housing. And I'd also like to know what the occupancy rate is of the current apartments that are there, because my understanding from the few people I know who live there are entire floors that are empty. So I would question why we're looking to build yet more residential rental facilities that are not going to bring tax dollars into the city while we have other apartments sitting here empty. These two ladies said a lot of the comments I was going to say too. Where are the impact studies? Where are the studies that are being available to the public that are showing the broader ramifications of this, the effects on roads and the infrastructures? There's a huge building being planned for the East Norwalk train station area. How many times do we hear of trucks getting stuck underneath that bridge? I mean, you'll have to widen roads. There'll have to be increased facilities. The school, having one child still in the school is a huge problem for me. It's terribly underfunded. My child's in special ed. He's not getting the proper services he needs now because there's not enough money in the budget. So now we're going to bring more people in who aren't going to be paying property tax, which isn't going to fund these schools. I think I hit everything, but basically I would just respectfully remind you that as elected officials, your fiduciary duty is to the taxpayers of Norwalk, the people who live in this community and work here, and the people who raise their families here, not to get another developer coming in with a bunch of promises that we're going to throw money at. So thank you.
Thank you. Donna Smirnotopoulos.
Good evening. Is this the one that works? Which one works?
Next one.
Thank you. Donna Smirnotopoulos, 18 Shorefront Park. You all should have received an email communication from me earlier today, so I'm not going to repeat what I wrote there. I will give you a little refresher on what I've learned about the Innovation District. I attended a Common Council Planning Committee meeting in May of this year, and Tim Sheehan explained the rollout of the Innovation District proposal, which would involve $15 million in taxpayer money. He described it as a tool that we would give to the Common Council. Right. So remember the James Bond scene with Ord Goldfinger where he has him strapped down to the gold table with a laser beam pointed right at his most lethal weapon? That was a tool too. Bond asked, "Do you expect me to talk?" And Goldfinger answered, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die." And then he walked away, just like that. He had the perfect tool. What could possibly go wrong? Too bad Goldfinger couldn't hit rewind and watch Dr. No and From Russia with Love. A lot could go wrong when you put even a great tool into the wrong hands. So if we're looking at this tool, the $15 million Innovation District Tax Credit for Developers tool, know that the tool is only as good as the people empowered to wield it. And that's the Common Council. So even if this is an excellent tool, the people are still relying on your judgment to make sure all goes according to plan. What could go wrong? Well, we don't have to watch Dr. No to take some guesses. All the people have to do is remind themselves of your recent past decisions. That's enough. On March 28th of this year, I wrote to every single one of you about the mayor's appointment process. That night, you voted on the mayor's nominee to fill a long-standing vacancy on the Planning Commission. The person he appointed and you approved never had an interest in the Planning Commission. She wanted to sit on the Redevelopment Agency board. I told you what I discovered when I dug around in the mayor's appointment process, how irregular and lacking in transparency and noble intentions it was. And you ignored me and went ahead and approved the next people who came down the pipeline without so much as a question about process. On January 3rd of this year, Planning Commissioner Mike Muschek came after me on the Norwalk Zoning Matters Facebook page. He wrote personal information about me, about my ex-husband, about his income. I shared this information with the mayor and with Leisha King, And a few months later, lo and behold, Mr. Mushak was reapproved and unanimously approved by the Common Council. Not a whisper regarding the impropriety in spite of other nominations in the past that were tabled and withdrawn for lesser offenses. In April of this year, the Common Council awarded a retainer to Ventura Law. I don't know if any of you were even made aware of a potential conflict of interest because the chair of your party, most of your party, the chairman of our fiscal body, the Board of Estimate and Taxation, had been hired as a partner at that firm in August of a few months earlier, in August of 2017. But this council had no problem awarding a retainer to the employer of your party chair and the chair of the BET, the guys in charge of the money. So now we're supposed to trust you with $15 million of our dollars and assume that everything will go according to plan. Whose plan?
Thank you. John Flynn.
Johnny Flynn. I'm at 27 Quintard. I did not prepare. I don't need to. I mean, things I've been hearing over the 17 years I've been here, to assume any new reorganization plan when so many things have gone wrong, and I'm not here to point fingers, but there's so many conflicts of interest. There are so many problems. Taking on another task at this point, I believe every single one of you is incompetent. Thank you. I have many points to make. As far as learning today on the internet that Eloise, who's I just met her the other day, she's fantastic, she was wonderful to my father. She chaired the ethics and the Ventura Law
No.
ethics thing? No?
The what?
The question that,
I've only chaired this committee.
what is the other chair that had to do with Ventura Law?
That is the ethics board.
Are you on it?
I cannot serve on that. I'm a council member.
Oh. The BET?
I was never a member of the Board of Estimate and Taxation because
Okay.
I'm a council member.
Let me go on. But anyway, no one's held accountable in Norwalk. I've had 1,200 stolen checks since 2001, cashed, totaling $39 million. Okay, every time you call the police department, you can't get a police report. I'm blue in the face about it. That money that was stolen and the stock certificates is now worth $47 million.
Mr. Flynn, can you just keep your comments relevant to either
Yeah.
reorg or the
Yeah.
innovation district?
This is,
Sorry.
hello, yeah. The reorganization is basically designed so that there's no accountability, okay? Because there's no chain of command. In other words, plausible deniability is the key. If you set a chain of command up that doesn't actually get any answers to the top. And so, for example, I was in court on Tuesday, okay? Told no permit was issued 90 times by planning and zoning on Fire Tree. Went to court, have the permit, seen it all, okay? Lied to by 6 people. Even the documents the court, that the city filed, Harry Rilling's motion, Amy Ertel's affidavit, every affidavit, Rocheford's affidavit, all the documents say no permit was issued. Yeah, it was issued by the health department, not planning and zoning. Okay, so I was lied to. Guess what? There's a prison opening up on my street, which we want to stop, but we can't because we're just being lied to. Planning and zoning said they weren't going to make anything, well, they weren't going to give notice to any abutter. I'm an abutter, okay? The fact is, every single thing that I look at has ethical problems, and ethics committee in Norwalk only has risk and no return. So nobody in their right mind would go and work for them, hearing everything that comes across the table where they only have liability. So here we go. I mean, everyone's talking about a reorg. It's a bad idea. The innovations thing, terrible idea. I mean, do you have MBAs in finance? Do you understand? I mean, here we go. We can't be giving $15 million to a contractor, build another 100 apartments, there's 300 new students in school, 9 less teachers. 30 people are complaining that I know that they have special needs kids that are being left behind. Why? They keep changing everything you do about special needs, and you never get it right. I mean, you need to take on any new business to get the things that you have together, complete, finished, whatever. Look at Loman's Plaza. Look at every project in Poco. I mean, you can go on for a half an hour. Look at the city and the condition that the people are living in. There's 80 piles of crushed cement and toxic soil piled around the city. People are breathing that in. 51 people filed on my website. They have asthma from Meadow Street to Bounton Street. There's a quarter-mile pile of uncovered crushed cement on Bounton Street for 10 years. I mean, these are issues that planning and zoning doesn't enforce. Hi, planning and zoning doesn't enforce. And you want to do anything like a new project? Planning and zoning doesn't enforce the law. Let me tell you something. All the laws you change, if you don't enforce them, it's meaningless. All the power you think you have, the city doesn't enforce. You think you're doing a job, you're collecting, you're an expense, and you're not a profit center, okay? You're totally mismanaging our money. I can't even tell you in words how big the problem is. You have absolutely no idea. If I know 51 people with asthma, there's 150.
30 seconds.
Kids. Okay, you want to cut me off? Fine.
No, I said 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds to wrap up.
You know, fine. I'm good. But I'm telling you, to accept another project, okay, with the way the deals are given, okay? Hi. You must be smoking crack. That's what I say.
I'm not, but thank you so much. Todd Bryant.
I'm Todd Bryant, 23 Morgan Avenue, and I don't know if I want to follow that. I'm the president of the Norwalk Preservation Trust, and I have a few questions. I'm here to speak about the Innovation District, and I have a few questions for you. Now we understand that the idea of the intent of this proposal is to incentivize certain kinds of development in the Wall Street area, and we understand that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I have some questions about it. First of all, I sit on the steering committee of the 2018 POCD, and that document still is supposed to be a blueprint for development in Norwalk. It's still in process. So I'm wondering why this proposal is being brought forth now before that plan of development is completed, and why it's not, the principles of it are not being included in the plan before it's being proposed as a binding ordinance. This confuses me. Wouldn't it be more effective if the city, if to complete the citywide plan and use the planning decisions in it for planning decisions about Wall Street in it as a basis for any incentives or anything like that? Also, I believe there's a federal program that Norwalk is qualified for that would provide similar incentives. And I'm wondering if this proposal for the Innovation District takes that into account. I don't see it in the document anywhere. Incentives, these incentives are heavily weighted to new projects, and they provide nothing for the businesses that have worked so hard to maintain a presence on Wall Street. Now, we all know these guys. And they've all really worked hard, and they're, some of them are right on the edge, but they're sticking it out, and they've been sticking it out for a long time. And to have them ignored, for new, I understand this is all about new development, but, you have to, if you're going to do that on Wall Street, you have to take into account the people that have sacrificed for a long time to keep that place alive. Then the last thing, and this is very much a preservation issue, is the incentives for rehabilitation of historic buildings are far less than those for new construction. They lack criteria, such as the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation for work that is done on those buildings. Now, I don't expect them to necessarily, I mean, it would be great, to require that for these incentives, every building meet those standards inside and out. That's what I do for a living, and but there should be some standard. First of all, the incentive should be more in line with those for new development, and secondly, there should be some standard for receiving those incentives for the rehabilitation of a historic building, so that you don't have somebody that goes in and disfigures it and still gets the money. So that's basically, those are my questions. That was me speaking as the president of the Norwalk Preservation Trust. Now, to speak as Todd Bryant about the reorganization, I haven't read enough of it to really understand it, but what I can tell you is that we're now working under a system of government that was mandated by the state of Connecticut in 1913, because nobody in Norwalk could agree on anything. And the state had to step in and consolidate the city. Chances are, many parts of that 1913 governmental system are obsolete. So it's probably time to change it. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria Bryant?
I'm Maria Bryant, 23 Morgan Avenue. I'm a member commissioner on the First Taxing District, a member of the Norwalk Green Neighborhood Association, and been speaking as a private citizen. Strangely enough, I agree with my husband on most of this, unusual as it is. But let me just reinforce some of that. In terms of the POCD, this has been I'm speaking on the Innovation District. It's been called a tool to implement growth on Wall Street. It seemed to me that you need to have the rationale, which would be the POCD, before you implement the tool to make sure you've got the right tool. In terms of the existing businesses, being on Morgan Avenue, being part of this nascent Norwalk Green Neighborhood Association, I see that there's, Wall Street has been a point of pain, that this is no news to anybody for quite a while. But there are things bubbling up, and there are efforts at art and culture, businesses that have been there, ticking along, waiting for it to take off, building owners who have been hanging in, that see the potential. I think that the way the ordinance is drafted, it's really not giving a fair shift to the people that are doing it right now. There needs to be a coordination or some incentivizing for those folks, because they're really dedicated, they're doing a great job. They need coordination and additional incentives maybe. And then the other thing is that there seems to be confusion, and I don't know if it's in the way the ordinance has been presented, the way it's been publicized, but there is confusion and a lot of discomfort about the subjectivity of it, and that it can be sometimes perceived as a giveaway to favored developers. And that's not a good position for you to be in, for the Common Council to be in, for any of us to be in. Fair and balanced, I think, is the watchword. All right, thank you. And I'll try not to agree with him again.
Thank you. Adolph? Would you like to speak? Yes, and then Diane.
My name is Adolf Niederman. I live in Silvermine. I've been there for something over 50 years. And I've seen the city of Norwalk go downhill. And I'd like to see a reversal. One of the things that has been obvious is that the redevelopment department doesn't appear to acknowledge POCD at all. They're going their merry way. They're advocating mixed-use residential when the consultant for POCD has suggested that Norwalk should look at light industrial and high-tech as an alternative for a renaissance, as opposed more multi-story residential. Now, if you look at the handout, as an aside, the number one recommendation of our Santec consultant is that there be more transparency. I felt that a one-day notice for a 30-page meeting is far from transparency. So you take that as a chastisement. The other thing, if you look down on page 1 with the arrow, it talks about pursue high-quality development. I can tell you from the people I deal with, and I'm on the NASH board, and I'm on the POCD advisory group, what we have on West Avenue is not high-quality development. It borderlines on medium-quality tenement. It is not designed for the best design practices. If you look at the next page, you'll see that 180 people showed up at the first POCD meeting, city meeting. And what was the one thing that stood out? If you look at the orange bar, it says no more multifamily tall residential buildings in Midtown or in South Norwalk. That is the essence of what the people don't want, any more of that. But redevelopment is hell-bent on that line of development in what they call the innovation district. Now, it's interesting that
So if you keep getting the microphone, we don't hear it.
Oh, this microphone? Okay. I have to look at my notes. It's interesting, if you look at the next page, Norwalk has next to the lowest ratio of industrial income to residential. We're in the same boat as Darien, Westport, and the Kingdom. That's hardly Norwalk. By the way, all of these all of these sheets come from Santec, the consultant that was hired. Now we look at the following page, which illustrates that our grand list has not grown but 3% since 2014. Think of the millions of dollars that have been invested in multi-story residential in that period of time, but nothing for that money has helped the taxpayers of Millwall. They're the stakeholders in this whole thing. Those stakeholders have been financing the developers.
You just have 1 more minute, okay?
Excuse me?
1 more minute, I'm sorry. One more.
I'm sorry, I have a lot to say.
I know, I'm glad you provided me with this.
What we need is a strong citywide economic development leadership. We don't have that. We don't have an economic development person, which ties in with the mayor's request for a redesigned city. However, he has put the economic development person as far down and away from him as possible on that chart, and is willing to spend $500,000 when the schools are underfunded. I vote against the mayor's plan, although certainly the city organization needs a redoing. Well, if I'm out of time, you can look at the balance of this information. But seriously, neither the plan for the innovation as focused by redevelopment should be approved, although there is a need for in the light industry, as the consultants have suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for attending almost all of our meetings, including interviews. Diane? Rachel?
Good evening, Diane Loricella, 21 Blue Mountain Ridge Road. I'm going to speak to both ordinance proposals, but I'll be brief because I'm going to submit written for the public hearing. I first wanted to say about the Innovation District. For those that have read it, it's not just about apartments being built. There's a menu of different kinds of uses. Now, I believe that having tools in the toolbox, as many as reasonably possible, is not a bad thing. However, this particular ordinance as written and what I'm thinking, lack of really in-depth discussion of what are the pros and cons of it, because I've been to some of the planning committee meetings, has to be noted by you all on the ordinance committee. So I want to make a suggestion. Go back to the drawing board on the Innovation District. Wait until your Chief of Economic and Community Development is hired. Because if it is the kind of person I've been hearing we're touting, they should know how to use the tools we currently have in our toolbox, and we do have them, and how to use them more effectively and efficiently. We also need to wait until the POCD is completed. So I don't mind innovative regulations, having once been a regulator, or ordinances, or policies, or even charter revision, but it's too premature based upon what I feel is a need for a reorganization of our city government, although I would have preferred it by charter revision. We're not going to do it that way at this point, so let's wait. What's the rush? Let's get it right. Here's the example for Innovation District, where I feel we have the tools in the toolbox now. They're just not being, in my opinion, it's a question of the silos that were mentioned, because there have been, in some departments, silo ways of thinking for the 30 years I've been here. It's just an improper personnel management issue. It's not that one department head is not supposed to talk to each other, it's that it's not managed that way by having staff meetings regularly. So the effectiveness and efficiency of any reorg is based upon the management of it, constantly tweaking it. It's a living thing. So that's one thing I would like you to come away with before you, I really think this should be pulled, the Innovation District, period. Now going to the ordinance for the reorg. I wanted, first of all, to thank you, Madam Chairman, for having this committee. I think, unfortunately though, for process, I'm big on process, so I'm very pleased that this has been changed. Although I do think having an important meeting right before a council, well, the first week, right after, the day after Labor Day maybe isn't the best idea, but I'm glad you postponed the public hearing, all of you voted for that. Go back to the drawing board, because as one speaker said, it's not ready for prime time. I have sat in on many of the different iterations of this reorganization. Some had said in a personnel committee, this is really a staff realignment, not a reorganization. Now I know that you all are talking about, and the administration is talking about reorganization. What is it? If it is truly a reorganization, as some previous speakers, including Ms. Goldstein, had said, and Ms. Britton Thompson, we're not looking at the pros and cons. Where are the efficiencies? How can you plan to make sure the job description is full enough if you don't really know what their objectives are? They can't make it up as they go, because we citizens are going to be spending a lot of money on these chiefs' jobs. So I want to give you some examples. On the economic development, the title is Chief of Economic and Community Development. I had suggested in a public participation that it be called, you add the tagline, and land use. If not, please have a separate chief for land use and just make them talk to each other. The reason being is that I really almost think the P&Z director should be the one who's the chief, an economic and community development person be the person below them with separate ideas. An example is with the BJ's wholesale site. Even though it doesn't lie as an example in the proposed innovation district, here's what we experienced. And you know I was very involved with the 2 iterations of permits for what is known as the BJ's wholesale site. Luckily, we citizens were able to convince the lawyer, who is now passed on to the big economic development site in the sky, and his clients, that it was a bad idea to put a large big box, yet again, like Norwalk needs more. Long story short is this: as soon as that applicant withdrew their application, people in city government, they could have brought in DECD people from the state. They should have been all over and trying to help that owner find a better use of that site. We have to have a more hands-on approach. We don't necessarily need to throw more money at it. We need to have better personnel management of it. So I thank you for your time, and that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. John Romano?
John Romano, 179 East Rocks Road, and I happen to own many properties, over 10 in the city of Norwalk, both commercial and residential, and they were all built and done and maintained and still with no incentives. I don't understand how you can even think about incentivizing others to come in and build shoddy, for the most part, structures that are going to be, once done, sometime in the near future, spun off to a REIT, and they go away, the building falls apart, and we're stuck with the residual of it. I think we're rushing to judgment, and I've heard many times, and I've actually agreed with David and others, and Adolph, in terms of the POCD. That should be the model that we kind of look at what's going on in the future, and that's far from being done. Aside from working and owning several companies, I'm also a harbor commissioner, vice chairman of the harbor commission. And with the POCD, we have never sat down or been asked to sit down to even consult on the product, the work product, and it goes along the Norwalk River. We're in the harbor. We have some say within that regard, and we haven't even inputted into it yet. That to me is an issue as well, but that's another issue besides this. So in other words, what I'm saying, and I want to be on the record for, and I think I've heard others say, let's put the brakes on a little bit. I don't know why these items are being shoved down our throats without any proper consideration, input, because a lot of times what I've seen and I've read, some of the people that are inputting on some of these things, we have public consensus, are not even really stakeholders. They're not the people that are going to be ultimately affected by what takes place and what goes on. I mean, one of the things that we've done a phenomenal job of is chased small businesses out of town or made them, I'm talking about contractors. We've rezoned their areas so they can't exist. We've made it very difficult for them to not have yards anymore, but park all their trucks and equipment indoors. These items need to be looked at as well. So moving forward, what I'm going to say is don't move so fast. Let's slow down. Let's bring stakeholders. Public hearings are fine, but I think brainstorming sessions that are not limited by minutes are more appropriate. Big picture. Maybe it's a call to action, but people submit a lot of stuff and have professionals look at it. You guys are all, we thank you for your service kind of scenario, but at the end of the day, what are your skill sets? Really, you're in school, Eloise, computer tech guy. Doug is building buildings, so he's got some construction background and everything. The rest of you, I don't know. Maybe I should, but I don't know. Let's hire some other people to do it. There's got to be models that exist. Because one of the things my father taught me as a little boy growing up, it's better to be a good imitator than a poor originator. And what I see here is a lot of poor origination. It's throwing stuff up against the wall. It sounds like it'll stick. You get too much bitching. Let's modify it a little bit. But what, at the end of the day, are we really accomplishing for the people that are paying the taxes? And that's my concern. You know, I think this is, the time has come where people in Connecticut are going to start voting and thinking things in terms of their pocket. And this, to me, is a pocket issue, big picture. So let's slow it down. If things need to be changed and modified and adjusted, I'll go along with it. I'll be for it. I'll be a proponent of it. But let's think it out a lot better than we have to this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
No, just gonna leave.
Oh, okay. Just ask one more time. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? No? Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much to those who spoke, those who are here. Do you have an approval to accept the minutes? Okay. Are there any changes that need to be made? Things that need to be amended? No? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Doug, did you vote?
Sure.
For or?
Well, I'm sorry. Could you repeat yourself? I was distracted, I admit it.
Yeah, because your approval of the minutes, but
I'm sorry?
approval of our last meeting's minutes.
Oh, I'm standing.
Okay. Just one abstention. Tim?
I think you've gotten a lot of comment back with regards to the Innovation District. Most of it is good comment. I think there are some statistical issues that went behind the consideration of the incentive in this particular geography. I don't think it's probably appropriate to go through all that with you standing here, but sure. I said that I thought a lot of the public comment was very good comment with regards to the Innovation District. The Planning Committee spent a year with this. The Ordinance Committee, I think, has spent 4, if not 5 months with it. If there's a desire to have further discussion about it, that's fine. There was a lot of comment with regards to housing. I think it's important to note that the population in the census tract that encompasses the Innovation District is the second least populated census tract in the city of Norwalk, second to Silvermine. And this is your urban corridor. You can't have the successful urban environment without people living in that environment. I understand that there's concern relative to multifamily housing and it being too high, but I think there needs to be an appreciation that in order for businesses to be successful in an urban environment, there needs to be ongoing demand in that area from the people that are living in the area. However we deal with the housing issues, we need to recognize that there's a need to further populate the census tract in order to have the urban area be more successful. I don't want to bore people with the statistical stuff that ultimately went into our consideration with regards to this. And when I say our consideration, this initiative ultimately came from the mayor's office, was brought to the planning committee. The planning committee had some differing ideas as to what the mayor's office was suggesting. They spent a significant amount of time with it. The redevelopment agency didn't just bring this forward as a redevelopment agency initiative. It was brought forward as a mayor's initiative. And then the planning committee took its own sense of ownership with it and made substantial modifications to what the mayor advanced. And then the planning committee advanced its work product to the ordinance committee for its consideration. I think, that needs to be considered in terms of how this issue relative to the tax agreement situation came into play. And I appreciate the concern, and it was put forward more in the planning committee's work product than in the ordinance that ultimately is before you with regards to existing businesses. One of the big constraints is that the city of Norwalk can't just arbitrarily make determinations about how it's going to tax. It has to have an enabling statute that's flowing from the state of Connecticut with regards to the structure of the tax. And unfortunately, what the particular statute that we're dealing with, it basically is only dealing with the increment. And I think there's a little bit of confusion that this is just simply a massive tax giveaway. The underlying taxes that the property is currently paying are always due. They are never forgiven. At the end of the day, what you're contemplating is the Common Council having the ability to deal with allocating a percentage of the increment of the improved value of a property. And obviously, new development is going to have a more significant increment associated with it than rehab. But there were certain examples that we were able to provide relative to the planning committee's work as to how we could weave that in with regards to historic preservation and small business, and basically working with the small business community that I agree has, through all the hardships in this area, tried to sustain themselves and be successful. So I think there's some, I'm happy to take back what I took down as questions this evening. I'm happy to submit that back to the ordinance committee, and you can certainly, we'll end up having that be posted so people can see what the answers coming back to each individual questions are, and I'm happy to take any questions that the committee might have of me.
Mr. Hempstead?
Tim, I'm just going to ask, it's the question, there was a question about occupancy, what literally are the occupancy rates? Is that part of the questions that you're going to work
Yes.
tonight? Same with the, I have one about, I'd like to know the what is on the market or what is available for small retail spaces. And I'll try and emphasize it's not about the Toys R Us building that's now empty. It's more about the new storefront retails that have been created over the years. What's the occupancy rate of those?
And you're talking specifically in the Innovation District geography? Or are you asking citywide?
In that district, and I guess the Sono district, you know, wherever there's been incentives for developers to come in and build, just so we have an understanding of, you know, what the occupancy rate. And there was a recent article in the Norwalk Hour concerning how we've become an exporter of people for work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I saw the word innovation district was supposed to be an innovative way of getting people to work here. So can you take that article as a basis and try and get us the real information? I didn't say it wasn't real, but the information that was provided that alluded to that article so we can have it for background understanding that.
Sure.
We're becoming more consistent.
Just make sure that, I'm going to wait to see your response, which I really appreciate. But a couple of things I want to make sure that you heard, because they can always come out as questions. Will you be able to address the number of students that are, and you've done this before, that have come out of these departments in West End, to address that question about school burden, so to speak? And you don't do it now.
I do have your email from earlier this afternoon. I'm prepared to address all of those questions, either right now or more formally in a response.
I just want to make sure that, because I don't know if it's race specifically, I know
Yes.
I asked it and a couple others, I just
Yes.
make sure that's going to exist. So then, the only other thing I just want to, and I'm not quite sure how you do this, but if you're able to address this, the timing versus the POCD in your comments, I'm not sure how easy that is for you, but just in terms of the timing of this whole process, I think it would be useful.
I would like to actually confer and get some answers back from Steve Kleppen with regards to the comments that we heard relative to the consultant for the POCD advocating against additional housing in the corridor. That surprised me, and I want to confirm that that is actually something that is being said, because I have no knowledge of that.
Are there any other questions, sir?
Yeah.
Then I'm sorry, just for the committee, after the official public hearing on September 4th, we'll also have public hearing discussion as we regularly do. So,
okay.
So that's why
All right.
we're kind of giving him questions.
Just make sure that was going to be the end. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, that was your question? Is that going to be your? Oh, no, this is not the end of it.
We're going to have a discussion after we close the hearing. That's what you just said.
On September 4th, yes.
Oh, no, okay, there's more information that.
So right now, we're asking questions for him to bring us information back for that meeting.
You said the density about Silver Line versus the internet. Does that include the projects that are either in waylaid or already approved? Are they into that count?
No, the adjustment has been made for projects that ultimately have gotten their CO. So the new projects that are existing today are into that count.
So could you add into that number all projects that are approved?
In terms of zoning approval?
Yeah, it's got those zoning approvals.
Okay.
And the other thing, the handout that we got tonight, did you get that scanned into our minutes?
Which,
Oh, we only got one. The one
from
yes.
the packet.
Could we get that scanned into our minutes?
He has it.
Thanks, Brian.
Are there any other comments? Mr. Sheehan? No? Okay. See you on the 4th.
See you on the board.
Thank you. Mr. Birdie, did you have any?
Sure.
Just to give a quick summary of the mayor's proposed reorganization. And you may have heard all of this before, but I'll just say it for those of you that haven't. The mayor proposed a reorganization. The Common Council established an ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee reviewed at some level of detail the proposed reorganization, made some changes to the proposed reorganization. As a result of all of that, we've taken what the ad hoc committee has proposed, and there is a portion of the reorganization that they've tabled for now, but the other elements of it that they have moved forward, we have presented to the Finance Committee, who moved it to Common Council for vote. We presented it to the Personnel Committee, who have moved it to the Common Council for a full vote. And at the next session of this committee, I presume you will, after the public comments and anything else you want to ask me, vote to move or not move the ordinances that are ordinance changes that are necessary to support the reorganization that has been moved forward by the other subcommittees to the Common Council for full vote. So we're sort of 2/3 our way through the process, getting the reorganization reviewed by the standing subcommittees. This committee is the last one, and after the public hearing next time, I presume you'll vote on that, and the Common Council will get to weigh in on the elements of the proposed reorganization.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Birdie? Mr. Armstead?
I gave you some technical stuff that
right.
The two job descriptions. In this day and age, though, his/hers, should it just be the word there?
I will check and see if grammatically that fits, and if it does, we can make those changes.
Just making a suggestion. And for the record, 90-4 inside the Public Works Director. I think it's, is that right in there? 90-4.
Mr. Armstead, could you just bring the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. In section 90-4, just so we're still following what got us to this position tonight, it's also very clear in that section too that any kind of advertisements for public notice are in this section of the Public Works Director, that it must be in the daily newspaper.
Let's be clear, we're going to talk about this after the public hearing.
Yes, we are, but if there were questions or information that came to
Well, I made a suggestion like the committee about I don't know if the wording nowadays should be changed, his or hers nowadays. I don't know if maybe it's more politically correct terminology. That's all I have. The 90-4 section. You're taking it?
No, I just want to make sure we
Yeah, no,
Okay, I got it. I just. So. It's there. No, it's in here. That's the revised one. It follows.
Are there any other comments? No? Thank you, Mr. Brennan.